Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Nicholas Albert, and today we're going to be talking about the 3 different methods that you can use to capture the Milky Way. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I absolutely love astrophotography. For any of you guys who have shot with me in person or have talked to me about astrophotography, you already know it is one of my favorite things, and being that Milky Way season is back, the core is back for us in North America, I'm very excited and I'm looking forward to getting my first Milky Way of the year very soon. And I decided to make this week's video all about how to capture the Milky Way because it's one of the big questions that I get when I'm posting these pictures and when I'm sharing my work with other people. People always ask, Nick, how are you getting these pictures? What are you using to capture these images? And, you know, it's always a mixture of a few different things. But I want to go ahead and share that with you guys so you can get out there and you can get a Milky Way of your own too. Let's get into this. So before we begin, let's talk about basics of the Milky Way. And what I mean by that is what gear is needed to get out there and get a Milky Way image. Now, when I say gear, I don't mean you got to rush out and buy flagship bodies and lenses and all that other stuff. Don't worry, you can do a lot more with just basic photography gear than I think you realize. And I think that's something that is lost on a lot of people. And I want to kind of demystify that right up front here because truthfully, you can do a lot with just a basic camera and a kit lens. You don't have to have the latest and greatest of everything to get out there and take incredible images. Now, obviously, the first thing you're going to need is a digital SLR or a mirrorless camera and a lens that goes with it. And you're going to need a tripod. That's really all you need to get started in astrophotography, guys. There isn't some big secret. There isn't some big, crazy anything behind this. It's really that simple. Now, when I'm talking about cameras and lenses, there's a couple caveats to that you need to be aware of. Now, the first and I think most important thing is your lens. And that doesn't mean that kit lenses are bad because surprisingly, a lot of them are actually pretty decent at astrophotography. You just need to know how to use it. Now, if you have access to lenses that are outside of the kit lens range, you can certainly use them. Or you can go and rent a lens. There's a lot of different options available today. But when it comes to lenses and cameras, I think that the lens is the most important part of being successful in astrophotography. Of course, the body is important, but realistically, you need the fast lens to get the light and get good images. What do I mean by that? Generally, the base rule of thumb is anything that is aperture 2.8 or less is going to be best for astrophotography. So think 2.8 or prime lenses that are 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, anything of that nature, you're going to get really good night sky images because you have a fast lens. Now, some kit lenses, they go to 3.5, 4, 5.6. These can still be used, but you're going to need to just bump your ISO up a little bit to compensate for those lost stops on the aperture side. When you're looking at a camera specifically for astrophotography, you want to be mindful of the maximum aperture of your camera's lens. The body is still important. Any modern body, though, made in the last, I'd say 10 years, is going to be plenty for astrophotography. You don't need to go out and get the latest, greatest thing. Full frame, APS-C, whatever, use what you have, master what you have, and grow from there. Don't rush out and buy a bunch of new gear just because it seems like it's going to help you learn this craft. Astrophotography is certainly difficult. I personally think that it is the most complex form of photography that a photographer can take on. But it's not something that's esoteric. It's not impossible to learn and get out there and take great photos. It just takes practice and patience. Now that we've discussed the lens, body, obviously need a tripod, What else is there to know about astrophotography? Well, you're going to want to find a dark sky site, get away from city lights, make sure that you're as far as you can possibly get from big light sources. So refineries, cities, neighborhoods, just get away from all of that and do your best to try to isolate the area that you're working in to a very dark spot. When you get there, look around, let your eyes dark adjust. You'll be surprised what you can see with just your naked eye, but once you get the camera set up on the tripod, you're going to be really impressed with what the camera sees, and that's where all the fun starts. Now, a couple last things about equipment and gear before we move into the three methods that I want to go over today. Ideally, when you're doing astrophotography, the best focal lengths that I recommend, especially first starting out, is going to be 24 millimeter or less. And the reason why is because of something called the NPF rule, or some people know this as the 500 rule. Now, the NPF rule and the 500 rule are separate rules. They are different things, and realistically, they're just not comparable. The NPF rule is the best rule to work with. Basically, what this says is that it's a mathematical equation that tells you the maximum exposure time that you can get on a specific focal length on a specific body before your stars begin to trail, so you can keep pinpoint stars in your images. And this is very important because if we're taking long exposure images of the night sky, you don't want your Milky Way to be streaking through the night sky. You obviously want those nice pinpoint stars. So using the NPF rule, you can do that by opening it up on the PhotoPills app, which is what I use. You can open up on the PhotoPills app, put in the body that you're using, the lens or focal length that you're going to be shooting it with, and then it's going to tell you the maximum exposure time that you have available for that specific focal length on that specific body before you start getting star trails. Now, there are two settings in there, accurate and I forget the name of the other one, but there's two different settings in the app. You can get a very accurate setting where there's pinpoint perfect stars, or you can get one where there's very slight trailing, but it's acceptable. Either way, it doesn't really matter. The benefit of shooting at 24 millimeters or wider is that most of the time, you're never going to notice the trailing anyways, because the photo is just so wide that nobody's ever going to notice. So that's why I recommend shooting at 24 millimeters or less. It's just a very good way to start in astrophotography and begin your journey into the astrophotography hobby. It's addicting, I promise. You're going to get out there, you're going to get your first image, and you are just going to lose your mind, and it's going to become everything. Every dark night, clear sky, you're going to get out there, and you're going to want to be taking images. So you've been forewarned. If an addiction arises out of this, don't blame me. That's all I'm saying. But without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump into the three methods that you can use to get your own night sky images, your Milky Way images, as we come into the Milky Way core season. Method 1. This is going to be the easiest method possible. This is taking a single image and literally just capturing that single image. You can use the NPF rule. Obviously, you're going to need to understand the relationship between aperture, ISO, and shutter speed on your camera. You're going to be doing a little bit of balancing in the field before you really get a good image to come back with. But my general rule that I like to follow whenever I'm recommending step 1 or method 1 to people is start at a 15-second exposure, start at ISO 1600, and open your camera's lens up to the maximum aperture and adjust from there. One big thing that you are going to really need to understand in doing astrophotography is the relationship of the exposure triangle. It is absolutely essential. Without it, you're just going to struggle the entire time. So master your exposure triangle here in method 1, taking a single image and getting that feel for astrophotography. You want to start here because it's going to show you the limits of what your camera and lens can do. Test different settings, test different ISOs. Use the NPF rule to experiment at different focal ranges, different settings, and really master getting a single image of the Milky Way. All you need is a tripod, put your camera on it, make sure that you're pointing south, southwest, depending on your location, and ultimately, as long as the Milky Way is up and there's no moon in the sky and you're away from artificial light, light pollution, you should get somewhat of a Milky Way in your image. Now, a good thing to do here to make sure that you get the Milky Way in your image is to use the PhotoPills app to plan out a little bit, make sure that you're pointed in the right direction, because if you point your camera off just a few degrees in either direction, you might not see it, or you might only catch a part of it. So make sure that you're just using the single image method, method 1, as the open door, if you will, to astrophotography. You want to get all your planning and all of your experimenting done here in method 1 because it's really where you're going to learn the most. Like I said, you're going to learn the benefits of your camera. You're going to learn what it can and can't do. You're going to learn how to plan out a Milky Way shot using the apps. You're going to learn how to capture pinpoint stars using the NPF rule. This is critical. This first step, this first method is where you want to begin. You don't want to rush out and start buying a bunch of stuff right away. Start here because astrophotography is a complex and sometimes very frustrating thing to learn. The second method builds off of the first, and that is stacking single images. Now, when I say stacking single images, it really is exactly what it sounds like. We're doing the same exact thing that we were doing in method 1, but instead of just taking one image, now we're taking multiple. If I'm doing a stacked sequence, I'm usually taking 30 to 40 images minimum and putting them all together in post-processing using something such as Sequator on a PC or Starry Landscape Stacker on a Mac. There's a lot of different options out there that you can use to create a stacked sequence. Now in stacking, you're going to need a tripod just like before, but you're also going to need this. This is an intervalometer, and what an intervalometer does is it allows you to use your camera in bulb mode to set up your exposure length and basically take the stacked sequence of images. You're going to set your aperture and your ISO in camera, set your exposure to bulb, and then choose your exposure length on your intervalometer, and then you're going to set the amount of exposures that the camera is going to take using the intervalometer. And the reason we're doing this is because taking a set of stacked images is going to help us overcome the noise in the image. Surely in method 1, you're going to notice that there is definitely noise in the image, and sometimes it can be kind of overpowering to a degree and kind of wash out the image and make it look grainy. That happens when we start bumping up our ISO and pushing the camera to its limits. Now, doing stacking and using an intervalometer allows us to stack multiple images on top of each other using Sequator or Starry Landscape Stacker, and it essentially helps us overcome the hurdle of signal to noise ratio, signal being good data and noise being the data that we really don't want, the grain. So stacking images adds a bit of complexity onto method 1, but you're essentially doing the same thing just a lot of times, taking a whole bunch of pictures and then bringing them all in to post-processing, stacking them all into one single image, and then moving forward with your edit that way. Now, the complexity grows in this step because now your sky is moving, but your foreground is staying the same. It's not moving. So this is where the next hurdle in astrophotography comes in, because you have to then stack your sky images and then blend them back in to your foreground image in post-processing. It sounds complex and it sounds way more complicated than it actually is, really. But it does add a bit of complexity, but produces better results than method one, taking a single image. Now, this is the point that I generally recommend people get to and then spend a good amount of time at. Method one, you're learning your camera, you're learning what it can and can't do. Method two, you're starting to learn the ins and outs of astrophotography, especially the post-processing piece, and really getting familiar with stacking images, editing night sky images, which is an art form in and of itself. But doing these two things is going to prepare you and really get you ready for the third method if you want to jump in and keep going past stacking images. Now, that is where this guy comes in. This is an Ioptron SkyGuider Pro. There's a few different options out there, but these are star trackers. There's the Ioptron SkyGuider Pro, there is the Star Adventurer. There's a lot of great options out there for star trackers. I personally use this. I have friends that use the Star Adventurer. Both of them are fantastic options. You really can't go wrong with either one, but there is a very steep learning curve to using these and understanding them. And I want to be the first to say that I have seen more star trackers and different kinds of similar related items pop up in Facebook groups and Facebook Marketplace and everything else because people run out and they buy one of these and then they just get overwhelmed. So my big recommendation, my suggestion to you, do not run out and just buy one of these right up front and commit to a star tracker. Try method 1 and 2 first. Master the camera, master the post-processing, and then move to this step. The reason being is because now you have to set this up and you need to absolutely understand the complexities of mastering manual mode in your camera and the complexities of post-processing. Using a star tracker, the way this works is you set it up on a tripod, you point it at the North Star if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, or the Southern Star if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, Polaris or Sigma Octantis, and you align it on that star. Now once it's aligned, you basically make sure that the tracker itself is level, you attach your camera to the front of it here, and then when you turn it on, this head is going to rotate and it's going to essentially cancel out the rotation of the Earth. That's beneficial to us as astrophotographers because now we can take longer exposures at lower ISOs and get overall better quality images than we would if we're taking, say, 10-second shots at ISO 1600. Now you can take 5-minute shots at ISO 64. It makes a very big difference in the quality of your images, but it adds a lot of complexity, especially once you begin to understand how these work. Truthfully, polar aligning a star tracker really isn't that difficult. It's just a method that you kind of have to develop for yourself, and there's some really great resources out there that help you get these things dialed in and help you just get it set up. It's really not all that hard. But the difficulty begins to arise in setting the camera settings properly because now you're so accustomed to taking shorter exposures at higher ISOs. Now you're learning your camera's capabilities again, but kind of in a backwards way. You're paying more attention to your histogram, which you should be doing anyways, but paying more attention to your histogram because you're shooting at lower ISOs at very, very different settings than you would be using method 1 or 2. Now, the biggest point of complexity in using a star tracker truly comes in the post-processing piece. And that's because now, instead of the sky moving and your foreground staying still, now the foreground is moving and the sky is staying still. And that can pose some challenges to you when you're editing in post-processing. Namely, trees, shrubs, anything with fine details that the camera is picking up. When you're stacking these images in post-processing, they're going to drag those those different elements with them. So that means that if you have a tree on the side of your image here, and your Milky Way is starting here and moving this way, as the camera tracks, you're going to have a silhouette of a tree kind of stacked through all of the images. Now, of course, if you wanted to get around that, you could only take one single image using your star tracker. I don't really do it that way unless I'm really pressed for time. Usually I stack my tracked images, and again, using an intervalometer, same thing as before. I'm just on a tracker now, but there are a few complexities to using a tracker. And again, it's not something that I recommend you just dive headfirst in because it can be overwhelming. There is a lot to it, and it does get to a point where you really need to learn in just taking single images and taking stacked sequences before you step up to something like this. Now, if you've already been out there and you're doing stacked sequences, or you've been doing this for a while and you want to jump into a tracker, by all means. I'm not here to tell you your abilities. If you're comfortable learning something like this right up front, by all means, go for it, do whatever you feel your best comfortable, or I guess comfort level is, and just master it. Because the better you get at getting good data in the field, the better your post-processing is going to be, the better your edit will be at the end, and the better images you will ultimately take when you're out there in the field. But mastering these 3 separate methods of capturing the Milky Way, you will be off to a great start. You'll be taking great images, and realistically, I think you'll be real happy with the results that you get. In future videos, I am going to be going ahead and demonstrating each method from start to finish to show you guys how all of these different methods kind of work, and breaking each one down step by step, from planning and getting out there in the field to setting up the camera, and finally bringing them back and post-processing these images, and kind of walking you guys through my process and just showing you guys what the end results are. And I'm going to post some photos here at the end of this video so that you guys can see the results using these different sequences. I'm actually even going to put some of my very first Milky Way images in there so you guys can see what my first Milky Ways looked like, and really where I've come to now and what my work looks like today. But until next time, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, do all those great YouTube things. I appreciate you guys sticking around for this video, and I'll be coming back in 2 weeks with another video. Don't know if it's going to be the methods, but hopefully the clouds stay away and we can get some of these videos out pretty quick. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.